Your hosts today are Bernie Steffen, leading our conversation, Raven Gray, answering the phones, Paul Raffel, reading your tweets, and I'm Robin Carpenter, joining this radical bunch of hosts.
So, welcome to Let's Talk Radio, Robin. It's such a delight. You have such a great show on Mondays, every Monday at what time?
Every Monday at noon, Pacific Standard Time, the Farm and Food Shed Report.
And you've been going for how many years?
I think it's going a little over 6 years now I've been doing that.
That's incredible. That's incredible. And you've got the energy to join us on this crazy show?
Well, I was so excited and honored when you guys asked me to join. And, you know, I remember when you guys were trying to create the show and when our dear Donna Sheehan was still with us, how excited she was about the idea. So when you asked me, I felt very honored, and I felt like Donna would be telling me, you get over there and do that right now.
And we've all along had Raven as a very strong voice for women, and it's important that we continue to have strength as the women's voices. So we wanted a strong woman to join us because
Absolutely.
Paul and I and Raven very insisted on it, really, is that we have that, and we're so delighted we found a very strong voice.
Well, I've so been enjoying the show, and as I said, I feel really honored and excited to be joining you guys.
Thank you.
Cool.
Okay, so I'm going to do the disclaimer now.
That part was all true.
The radical disclaimer.
KWMR does not take a stand on any of the issues discussed on Let's Talk. Opinions expressed on this program are those of the hosts and our callers and don't necessarily reflect the views of KWMR, its board of directors, underwriters, or members.
And today we're talking about oil. I mean, oil, we mean oil and gas, petroleum, fossil fuel. There's so many uses. Well, let me ask this. Do any of us here think we have something that was made without oil?
Actually, I don't think you could, because even if, like, I'm wearing a organic silk top, but however anything is produced, it's taking oil to run the machinery, to run the cars that the people got into to go to the factory.
Absolutely.
It's everywhere.
Yeah.
I've got some buckskin clothing that I've made myself from deer that I've tanned and skinned and used bone tools with, and so I can say yes, I've got some things. But I'm not wearing anything right now.
No, but I mean that's an example of how hard it is to accomplish that, because as you're pointing out, even if it's not in the plastic or the ingredient to the material that you're making, and it's involved in the manufacturing process, in the distribution process, in the packaging, the everything. And so we are the oil age, are we not? I
Yes.
mean, we are defined. Some people say we're in the information age, and I buy that on top of oil, but there wouldn't be an information age if there wasn't an oil age.
Right.
Exactly. We wouldn't have what we have without the oil currently.
Oh, and so I don't know if everybody has been following this, but for a while now, oil has been on a downward price spiral. So the global glut on oil, we see it in this country by our gas prices, but they're not as low as they reflect what's really happening on the per barrel basis. You know, it wasn't too long ago when the fracking first started, they said, oh, oil at $100 a barrel, we can match that. We can make that market price by investing in new leases and new equipment and the whole new infrastructure, because this new fracking thing, the conventional oil came out of pools and it seeped out of the sand, but now that oil that's trapped in the rocks, we've got to slam it. We got to put pressure on it with pressurized water, and we got to add chemicals, and we got to have all these ways that we smatter that rock to get that last bit of oil. And so this investment has been huge. Now we've got a glut. Companies are going bankrupt. Nations and states are all feeling the pinch because so many budgets are on it. So it's, I think, a crisis time, and the stock market has been reflecting that. The stock market has been declining since the first of the year in unprecedented levels. That's got a lot of people freaked out. I don't know. I sort of get excited by this because I think it's the opposite of what will ultimately happen, but it's an interesting phenomenon that's happening right now.
Yeah. And why is it happening, do you think? I mean, is there too much oil, or are people using less oil? Is it a combination of both? What's going on?
It's both. It's both, because the production, I've got numbers that show it going up in North America. The biggest producer is the United States, and in 2010 we had about 10 million barrel per day production, and now we're at 14 million. So that has definitely increased.
And it's interesting because going back to dear old OPEC, which are the 13 countries that really have controlled oil for many, many years, and just to look at that, which OPEC's job is to coordinate and unify petroleum policies of its member countries, which are, Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, the founding countries. And so they've been able to help control the price of oil. And when oil goes too low, they pull back on what they release, but they're not pulling back. And there's, and I have not been able to read deeply enough, but it's destabilizing places like Venezuela. It's really hurting Russia, where the ruble is devaluing quickly, and Russia is, all the countries that are big exporters of oil, it's really hurting them. And Bernie, as you said, also oil usage is going down. China is using less than they thought. So it's an interesting thing because there are players that could make it not so dramatic. Yesterday, oil dropped to $27 a barrel. It's back up to about $30 today, but in order for them to make a profit for Iran, oil must be selling at $131 a barrel. Right. Libya, oil must be selling at $184 a barrel. So these countries, if they have a lot of debt and they don't have surpluses to cover, as well as
It's not just these countries. I mean, I think you're absolutely right, and the examples are many. And so let's take them a little bit.
Yeah.
You've got a bunch there, but you're so right in talking about how it's hurting us. This price is hurting us. But
maybe it's helping too, because sometimes you need crisis and pain to go to the next place.
I think there's a lot of wisdom in that, and I think it is. But where we're going right now with stocks, on the one hand, consumer products for us will be cheaper because the oil is involved in making all these things, and so for a manufacturer that uses a lot of oil, this is a good thing. Mm-hmm. But the manufacturers of the oil drilling business, of the oil refinery business, of the oil storage and tanker and transportation, those are the ones that are all taking a hit, and that is so many countries heavily invested in that. But we are particularly vulnerable in the United States, too, because you know how North Dakota became the economic engine for a while here because all of that Bakken shale was being just pulled out of there as fast as you can find rail cars to get it out by or pipelines to build. I mean, they could. And so it was a whole Old West kind of a boom that happened there. And, these booms have happened in other countries, as you talk about, Venezuela.
Venezuela's in trouble now. The conservative government is coming in. Conservatives have taken over the Congress down there, and so that's all going to change. There's going to be big trouble down there.
Well, and the income they have from oil, that's just gone away.
Yep.
So with that income gone, that's hurting, I'd say, every government agency right now.
And you see places like my original home, the Gulf Coast, huge machinery manufacturers, drilling bit parts and drilling parts companies. Just one yesterday announced that it's closing in Houma, Louisiana. It's laying off 80 workers. That business is closing down. And to me, I look at, we as the middle class or upper middle class, we've not recovered from 2008. We've just dropped down into I don't even think there's an upper middle class anymore. So these kind of workers and people that are working in these arenas, they're sort of the last of our blue collar workers in a large number. So that will have an impact as well. And who's been consuming at the level they consumed before 2008? Not the middle class.
I know, but it is
the military.
Yeah.
A lot of it is indeed economic weakness.
Yeah.
Some of it, I think, is also consciousness. I mean, there is a growing climate consciousness movement that has made the standards for producing coal, the standards, although they're weak in a lot of areas, tighter. And I know particularly in the coal, and it's related to the gas, their prices have plummeted too. And what was seen as 200 years of reserve of coal left really comes down to, can you afford to get the coal that's left? And right now it doesn't sell for enough to invest in additional fields, and so oil rigs are disappearing. I have an international rig count that's a graph that comes down since April 14 through the end of last year, just gets down to where it was back in 2010.
Wow.
In terms of the number of rigs.
This is in the States?
Rigs. This is international.
Yeah.
But and none of these graphs it's important which graph you're looking at. They're all saying the same thing.
Yeah, everything's going
This
down.
is global in terms of the oil glut. It's global in terms of the effect on the price, and it's global in effect on the economies that it's hurting. I wanted to say something about the price, the international price that's quoted, that's somewhere around 25 or below right now. That's based on conventional oil standards that most, Middle Eastern oil in Venezuela, they'd all pass that. But the Bakken-produced shale oil doesn't. It's at a lower grade, and so it sells for less than that. And it's been below 20. And some are saying these prices are going to fall down to $10 a barrel, in which case it's a catastrophe for the people that are in that market.
And a lot of the production from the States here is with smaller companies, right? Smaller drilling companies. There's a lot of smaller companies got into the game because it was so easy to get it out and so profitable. And as they fall off, then the big boys are going to buy up the smaller companies, and we'll see a conglomeration again of the big boys controlling big oil, controlling everything? Or? Yeah.
Well, going back to why so many smaller operations could get going is there was a lot of money available. So
right.
the banks were eager to lend. Look at $100 a barrel here on the global market, and look at how much oil is here. Darn right, I want to get in on that. And so everybody was persuaded by the fracking boom, and it was oversold, and it met with big resistance. Activism resistance in states like New York has really pushed back, and so some of the costs they were hoping to defer to other people and future generations and all that started to mount in terms of the legal challenges that they're getting. And it was, I think, gratifying to see where a state like Oklahoma had 12 people bringing suit for the earthquakes that the fracking was causing.
Right. Yep, it's...
So I just want to remind everybody that this is Let's Talk Radio with hosts Bernie Steffen, Raven Gray, Paul Raffel, and I'm Robin Carpenter. Please call us at 415-663-8492 and share your thoughts on the current oil glut, the low prices, and what impact it's going to have on us. Is it having an impact on you? Give us a call at 415-663-8492. Just to follow up, Bernie, with what you were saying.
How come nobody's calling?
Maybe everybody's looking at their 401ks and they're freaking out.
Just say the right word. Yeah, I think we may have a caller.
Good morning, caller. You're on the air. Can you tell us your name, please?
Yes, Jeffrey Wilkinson.
Hi, Jeffrey.
How you doing?
Good.
Good.
What interests you most about this subject?
Well, two things. One, the stock market doesn't like it when the oil prices drop, but those of us regular people who just drive cars love it because the gas prices go down.
What do you pay right now a gallon?
I found the cheapest place in the Bay Area. I'm paying now $2.18 a gallon.
Wow. I drive diesel. I can only get it down to $2.43 or something like that.
Yeah, this is on Sir Francis Drake, just before it becomes 3rd Street there.
Are you talking about the one that has been reading people's debit card pins and causing lots of consternation?
I've heard that, but I don't think that's the one.
Okay, all right.
But I pay him cash anyway for the cheaper rate. But I have a question for you. I've been asking people. I've never gotten an answer. Nobody knows.
This will be the place.
That gas station, just for example, $2.18 a gallon. You go up the street 3 blocks, and it's $2.45 a gallon. And there can be discrepancies within 4 or 5 blocks I've seen around the Bay Area that in 4 or 5 blocks, $1 a gallon discrepancy.
Wow.
How does that happen?
Well, I'm willing to take a crack at it, and I invite my co-hosts here to offer their opinions. Obviously, we haven't done a study, so these are all opinions you're going to get. But my opinion is that the others who are getting $2.45 can get that, and they have found that with that price, they don't sell as much as the place at $2.18, but the extra margin makes up for it, and that for the total revenue, they look at the combination of how much margin they have per gallon versus how many gallons they sell. And so they make a a choice that is dictated by what is around them and what their costs are. And so that varies by location.
That makes sense, and I guess that's half the equation. The other half of the equation is really, why would anyone drive down the street and pay $2.45 when 3 blocks down you can pay $2.18?
Well, maybe the 218 place is really crowded all the time, like the one on at the hub there.
And maybe you got a company credit card and you don't give a damn.
And when you go up the street, you're spending what 30 cents more per gallon. It doesn't seem like much until you actually put the
They
gas
have better
in.
Slurpees there.
One of my understandings is the reason they can charge less if they have a mini mart or any kind of little market there that they're selling things at. Their actual profit comes from the mini mart sales, not the gas.
Well, how much of the stuff that's sold in the mini mart is oil-based?
Probably all of it.
Oh, so it makes sense to put that
Everything's
together.
wrapped in plastic at mini marts.
All these gas stations have little mini marts. So
Yeah,
Do you
that's
spend
true.
money there?
Pardon me?
Do you spend money in the mini mart?
No.
No, I wouldn't admit it either.
They have a bathroom. I use that occasionally.
There you go. Yeah. That used to be the mainstay of any kind of cross-country travel, isn't it? The gas station family go to the bathroom and freshen up and.
Right.
So I guess there's a underlying question. Although drivers like to have cheaper gasoline, if it's at the expense of the country's economy, if the economy is going to fail because oil is so cheap, should we be happier to spend more for gasoline?
I hate the oil, I hate the fossil fuels so much. I mean, I drive my car. I got, what else am I going to do?
Yeah.
But I'm so looking forward to us getting off the fossil fuels, going to all the forms of renewable energy, putting everybody to work, building the infrastructure that needs.
Yeah, what price do you convert? I don't know when I would do this because giving up my car would be one of the hardest things to do. But let's say it goes up to $20 a gallon. Is that enough motivation to not have as much mobility in your life?
Oh man, $20 a gallon. I hope you're not in charge of the price thing.
No, I don't think it's not. Nobody will be in charge.
This is the
It's what they'll be able to
president.
get because there'll be so few gallons at that point. It'll be the opposite of what we have now.
Yeah.
I'm retired, and my mobility means everything to me. It means I can go out and volunteer in the park in Point Reyes National Seashore. I can take kids birding. I can go to East Bay and visit my grandchildren. I can go to movies. I can drive to L.A. and see my girlfriend. My mobility is everything to me.
Yep. Well, let's hope. For your sake, it doesn't get to 20.
Well, and one of the things, too, is I think for us as individuals to think that we're really going to change it by our individual driving habits is naive, to be frank, because it's really got to come from a bigger place than just our individual driving habits.
Right. Vote for Bernie.
Oh, we can end on that note. Thanks for calling.
Thanks for calling, Jeffrey.
Yeah.
Oh, he wasn't talking about me, was he?
I don't think so.
Yes, please clarify which Bernie you want to vote for. So that begs the question then, is the price being manipulated in order to drive America into the ground, or to make political change in Venezuela and Brazil, or to hurt Russia? I mean,
Or all of the above.
or all of the above, and if so, who's doing that? Is it the Saudis that are doing it mostly?
I think the Saudis are doing it in partnership with the U.S. military-industrial complex elite. Because, what you said actually, because I have my inside sources into the oil and gas industry, and actually even low oil prices stimulate demand. So global demand for oil grew by 1.8 billion barrels of oil per day last year, and that's expected to grow at 1.4 million barrels of oil per day.
It was expected.
We're still in January of 2016.
Exactly.
But it grew by 1.8 billion barrels per day last year.
Yeah, I understand.
And it's still growing. And the fact is that, this is my opinion, obviously, that Saudi Arabia is flooding the market, is dumping the oil because because they want to damage the U.S. oil
the
home
because
industry.
part we might disagree on. I mean, the fact that they're flooding it doesn't lead to the because.
Well, I think they do, and I
Okay.
think there's some conspiracy happening here as well, because, I also looked up this. Over the past 18 months, the U.S. military has sold more than U.S. dollars $24 billion of military weapons to Saudi Arabia in the last 18 months.
Yeah.
So they don't really Saudi doesn't want the U.S. out of Saudi.
Well,
And this doesn't hurt the U.S. as much as it hurts Russia. If
Right
you look
now,
at
yeah.
that, it's not really hurting us. It means that fracking operations and others are pulling plants down and we may lose some jobs. But in the overall picture, who it's really going to hurt are people like Russia and Venezuela, far more than us. It will hurt us, but not like it's hurting them.
Let me talk to Saudi Arabia for a moment, because I think, indeed, they've taken on a war with Yemen. From what I read, though, is their assets from oil have diminished so much that right now they're really hurting, that they have had to scale back on their war from what they had as an intention, and maybe the amount of money they paid the United States, or that's all changing now. So when projections before were for this year to grow again, that's a normal thing. But I'm really asking, is the first 3 weeks of 2016 telling us that it may go opposite of some of those projections? Because I don't think anybody anticipated oil going this low.
Well, in this morning's Economist article, they said that Saudi Arabia is pumping at full tilt, and it's widely thought the Saudis want to drive out higher-cost producers from the industry, including some of the fracking firms that have boosted oil output in the U.S.
It's working.
From 5 million barrels a day in 2008 to over 9 billion now, so 9 million now. And that Saudi Arabia is also prepared to suffer a lot of pain to thwart Iran, its bitter rival, which is posed to rejoin oil markets
That's right.
as the nuclear sanctions are lifted.
Yeah.
So it's obviously more complex. I mean, what Raven referred to is that the arms sales, what we know is how it's hurting Russia. What we know is happening as Iran starts to come back.
Well,
into the
Russia,
fold.
as you pointed out, is a huge exporter of oil. So they get money from Europe because natural gas, the pipelines through the Ukraine were an issue. I mean, there have been lots of sort of political hassles about Russia cutting off the fuel to Europe. They'd freeze during the
winter.
The windmills and the solar panels won't heat the houses. I mean, they need the gas. They need it flowing from Russia, who has a lot of it. And but Russia, when it on a world market now, is competing against other fossil fuels that are really cheap, and they get so much of their revenue from that, they maybe have to scale back their military ambitions too.
But it would make sense for the Saudis, if this is a particularly great moment in time, to disable and create disruption in the global oil supply that puts them, because they've lost the power seat somewhat with with the fracking in the U.S., with Russia's massive oil output. They've lost that hammer that they've had for so long. So this may be a time like take the pinch, take the hurt, and get that hammer back. And as Raven suggested, the the Saudis have always been our buddies, that we may be behind the scenes helping them.
Well, the Saudis were our buddies because they were the ones who would throttle, because they had the largest in the world reservoirs, and they had the ability to turn on the spigot bigger, faster than anybody else. And by being buddies with the U.S., if we asked them to slow it down, they would. If we asked them, and then they worked with OPEC or whatever. But right now, their relevance is less, because in North America, in Central and South America, we have expanded. So what used to be the mantra of politicians is become independent of foreign oil. So we did become independent of foreign oil. We had a law for 40 years that says we will not export oil from now. That was just lifted. The Congress and the president all conspired to allow the glut to flow out of the U.S. as well as other places. So we are now a bigger player in terms of producing, but many see that as short run. The large reservoirs that Saudi Arabia has are somewhat stable but showing some decline. Smaller reservoirs tend to have a steeper curve. They tend to go to peak production quicker, and then they fall off quicker. Larger reserves tend to have a softer landing at the end. I mean, I'm no expert, but this is what I'm reading that sort of explains why the peak oil thing hasn't kicked in. And if you, like Saudi Arabia sometimes did, put more straws in the ground and suck it out faster, obviously you're shortening the lifetime of all of those wells.
Of those reserves.
And fracking set it upside down, and I would agree that they would be motivated to try to break the backs of the American fracking industry. And that's not being a friend to the United States. That's saying we're also in trouble, actually.
Although the bigger guys behind the scenes may see that fracking is catching up with this pretty quickly, and we're going to discover that fracking is causing earthquakes and poisoning our groundwater, and that they see that inevitably fracking needs to come to an end because there's an amount of toxicity. It's sort of like if you think of the oligarchy and the big corporate 1% as a virus. And if a virus is so hot that it kills its host off too fast, it can't stay alive. So you've got to keep your victims, your host, alive long enough. So if fracking's something that's, burning out the host and killing your consumers off too quick, that's just a speculation on my part, is that they may realize, even though they're trying to pass laws now that states and counties and communities can't ban fracking, it's becoming clear that the public is becoming aware of how we're being poisoned, and that's one of the most dangerous things.
Well, and that translates to the industry as additional costs, because they have to fight they want to fight the regulatory controls. They want to indeed force us back to a lower production and not doing as much exploration. But as all of these opportunities for the last bits of oil, we're all competing for the last drops, and we're not looking beyond that, because this situation has to turn upside down. Oil is a limited resource. The fact that we made a human ingenuity breakthrough to have Halliburton happen to be the company who figured out how to do this, buddies with the vice president, making laws to say they're exempt from clean water, air, and acts, and et cetera. And that whole conspiracy, but it was sold on being a long-term thing, and it's turning out to be a short-term thing. Yes. And it's maybe even shorter now because of this economic reality than what the physical realities are. You stop with a rig and drilling a well or taking from a well when the cost to get it is higher than the value coming out. So they're all stopping. It's over for fracking. What does your friend think of that? It's over for fracking.
Apparently fracking, I wouldn't believe anything that doomsayers are proclaiming about the end of fracking and the shale oil boom. It's just getting more efficient. Apparently we're now entering fracking 2.0. And according to John Shaw, chair of Harvard's Earth and Planetary Sciences Department, he quoted, "It's fair to say we're not the end of the shale era, we're just at the very beginning. And lower prices are prompting unprecedented innovation in the technology for fracking, and production per well is actually increasing, and costs are being slashed. So even though rig counts have fallen and it looks like the industry is collapsing, total production has actually held steady, and in some places is continuing to rise."
Wow.
That's what the forecast is from within the oil industry.
There you go.
Yeah. Well.
Less players, but some of the bigger players are coming in and buying up all the smaller players.
And they'll have even more power.
And they're refracking existing wells and finding that with greater, newer technologies, they can actually get even more oil out. I don't think it's got anything to do with the public with the public, as usual, are powerless.
And it's interesting because Paul made that point, and you're making that point as well, Raven, that once again we have another situation where you create this disruption, and then the little guys and the wildcatters and all the guys that were doing the small businesses, you freeze them out to where they have to sell. And then now we have 3 people owning all of the media in the world. We'll have like 5 people owning all the oil. And right now the biggest investment of anybody is in water. So those are some pretty scary things.
The new generation of rubber baron.
So let's take on that question. On the one hand, we've got this glut of oil, and as Raven was talking about before the break, fracking 2.0 is coming to be even more efficient, and will probably change the equation and really could put more oil into the line. How long can that last? The theory of peak oil is no longer, it's no longer like the theory of climate change. It's a fact because it's a limited resource. What the technology has done is gone after the harder to get. If you got the big droplets with fracking 1.0, now fracking 2.0 will get the smaller droplets, because when this oil was first created under the pressure, under the millions of years of decomposition and pressure and heat. It seeped into rock, and it seeped into finer and finer rock. And so shale or other geological formations are such that we first got the stuff that was pooling, coming right out of the ground. And then we got the stuff that was low to the surface. And then we went deeper and deeper and deeper, and we're going under oceans, and we're going deeper. Mm-hmm. And with fracking, I view that we're going more explosive, more aggressive, probably more toxic. Mm-hmm. Probably chemists have been working on this fracking 2.0 to get even better. But where does it all end? I mean, in the end, after we've gotten the last drop that we can possibly get, and we know that our whole lifestyle is tied to oil, what are we doing right now to sort of take that knowledge that the human species has right now? And because the people in these oil companies know it. They've experimented with becoming energy companies and getting into renewables, mm-hmm. and they're transitioning into other fields to stay alive, but the consolidation has been going on for a long time. Just recently this month, in the coal industry, of course, which is related, Arch Coal is the second largest producer of coal, has gone into bankruptcy. And so has Patriot Coal and Walter Energy and Alpha Natural Resources. It's interesting, coal company called Alpha Natural Resources. Peabody is the largest, and it is still there. Mm-hmm. But coal has been cut way back because of the cheap alternatives of natural gas, especially natural gas.
Is that true globally, coal production?
I think some countries like China, the United States, and Russia have had a lot compared to other countries. Mm-hmm. And so they, like Japan, has to import everything. So they're not importing coal, they're importing gas. And gas has been also one of those that's harder to export. It goes in the pipelines like from Russia to Europe or across the Middle East. But across the oceans, they've had to develop this new LMPG kind of terminals and ships that mm-hmm. would carry the compressed natural gas across oceans to make it a more global commodity. And but those investments now are turning sour. Shell got their butts kicked in the Arctic just recently, and that, though, I have to say, I think had a lot to do with people power. I think those people hanging off the bridges, the Greenpeace and all that brought it to a head. Plus, they also saw the price going down, I'm sure, and the risks. And regulatory pressure, I think, is starting to have some effect. In my mind, it would ban it all, but, that's more regulation than most people want. But it has some impact. But you're true. Money ultimately talks. And with oil, it's money. I want to contrast for a moment gold and oil. In the old days, there was the gold rush to California, like there was the oil rush to Oklahoma and Texas and then to North Dakota and all. Well, with gold, it had the value of its preciousness because there was so little gold and it had a real strong appeal. But once you have that jewelry worth of gold, having a lot more gold, if it's raining gold from the sky, what can you do with it all? I mean, in the end, it has this artificial value. But there's nothing artificial about the value of fossil fuels. They pack so much energy punch that we have come to disregard them. I've been challenged by some of the people in this field talking about a car. Let's take a 4,000-pound car, and it's sitting on Route 1, and you push it for 40 miles. How much energy, human energy, does it take to equal 1 gallon that you bought at Greenbridge, put in the tank, and move that car? We have been burning this precious material, and how much of it is used for other than heat and transportation? And
right.
It's like 3% or something.
I would say that it's primarily in manufacturing. I think you see, we think that because I always say people, you think by changing your driving habits, it's going to have an impact. But it's such a minuscule percentage of what petroleum's used for. And it's really who's using the majority of it? The giant corporations that are doing manufacturing and creating products.
And the cost of it to them has always been negligible. Even when it was $100 a barrel, the value that this added energy source gave them to allow them to do manufacturing. Indeed, it built the industrial age. The industrial age started on coal, did it not? And then it went to oil. Then it went to natural gas, nuclear, and now people are saying, well, is it going to go to solar and wind? The biggest difference between solar and wind is that you can't do solar and wind without oil. you can do oil without solar and wind.
Right. Yeah, manufacturing is still totally dependent on it. You have a list here. It says 1 42-gallon barrel of oil creates 19.4 gallons of gasoline. So that's less than half of a barrel of oil creating gasoline. The rest is used to make everything else, from solvents to, pharmaceuticals to sweaters to plastics.
Some of our food.
Every plastic. Yeah, some of our food. Everything. So, it's pesticides. We have a caller.
Good morning. You're on the air. May I have your name, please?
Good morning. This is Andy.
Hi, Andy.
Hi, Andy.
Hi, Andy.
Hi.
Are you the Andy related to Robin?
That's the one who just texted her and said, I don't have anything to say, and then I thought of something.
Oh, cool. Well, thanks so much for calling in, Andy. And how do you feel about your wife being with this rowdy group here?
As long as you're, treat her well, I'm fine.
Great.
I can hold my own.
So, one of the things that you guys have been talking about is how oil is in everything, which I agree with. And we've talked a lot about cars and how the cars themselves aren't necessarily the biggest contributors. But one of the things that I've always scratched my head about is the production of electricity for electric cars. And people buy electric cars thinking that they're doing something good, which they may or may not be, but a great deal of electricity is produced using oil.
Yep.
Sure.
Are there any statistics on that? Have you looked into this?
I'll give you some of my knowledge about what PG&E has put out about California. We use almost no coal in PG&E's energy production, which is great. And then most of it is natural gas. There's a large chunk that comes from hydro. And then the oil, separate from the natural gas, is a relatively small amount. But natural gas is the major amount.
Oh, really?
Now, some areas that get it from coal are much worse in terms of their pollution. So California, PG&E territory, it's not as good as when you get Marin Clean Energy, and they're buying with a higher priority for renewables and higher goals for renewable use. But are you talking gas and oil interchangeably, Andy?
I was really thinking about oil in particular. Certainly, air pollution is a big consideration, but I'm actually thinking more globally. That California leads the pack in many things, and so I think we're trying here to do things more wisely.
Yep.
But I can probably point to other states in the United States that are less further along, and certainly other parts of the world. So it's helpful to make an incremental change, but where we need a dramatic change, I'm wondering, what the impact of.
It's a great point, Andy, and let me take a crack at the electric car illusion, because most of us are sold the idea you start keeping track of the energy when you buy it. You just paid $50,000 for a vehicle. Okay, now let's see how little energy I can use. But if you go back when you bought that $50,000 car, or you got a little one for $25,000 or a Tesla for $100,000, how much energy went into the building of that car? Most analysis shows that if not as much, more energy went into that, so that the oil and the gas and all of that fueled the mining, the manufacturing, the distribution, the transportation across the oceans, the distribution, all of the infrastructure that goes with that. That we tend to not want to account for when we're comparing our apples to oranges.
We actually had, Andy and I, a personal experience that this is something that really bugs the heck out of me, is we were in San Francisco on Tuesday, and we were parking the car, and we got out, and a gentleman came up. Now, on the upside, he warned us that we couldn't see the sign, which was halfway up the block, that the street cleaner was coming in 15 minutes. So I was thankful for that. But then he began to berate us because we have a 16-year-old Land Rover. And he goes, how in 2016 can you be driving a vehicle like this? And I wanted to say, first of all, my husband and I primarily only have one vehicle. We chose to have that instead of a truck because it works as a car and a truck, and we're constantly hauling things. I do catering work, so that was our compromise. Andy and I have not bought a new car in 16 years, and we use the stagecoach. We use normally when we go to the city, we were having to haul stuff into the city. We take the bus. So this thing of pitting us against each other with self-righteous statements, we're not each other's enemy, and you don't know someone's personal story. You don't know what else they're doing. And so that's another thing that I see when we focus in on, like, are you recycling correctly? Are you driving the right car? That is a distraction. It's the bigger picture that's the most important. And we need to know that it's really us against them. It's not us against each other. And so there are all those factors, as you said, Bernie. What about people who buy a new car every 3 or 4 years? But maybe it's more gas efficient. And also, they don't know what it is that you do, why you might need a vehicle, or, those kinds of things. So that was really, I've had that happen before. I've had the Land Rover keyed before. I've had people key it with, something that I can't say on the radio about having a big vehicle. I had it keyed right by Grace Cathedral one day with a little note in key message. And I thought,
it's not a Hummer.
These people, exactly. And but I just thought they don't know my story.
No,
they don't know.
And I want to say I noticed that a few years back. SUV was sort of the most embarrassing thing you could have.
Yeah.
Hummer was the epitome of that. I think Marin passed a law that you couldn't bring Hummers into the county, but I'm not sure. And it had to be a Prius. Oh, we got a caller.
No, we still have Andy on.
It's up drop.
Yeah, thank you,
Andy. I'm sorry.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Just like at home.
Oh, geez. I get carried away on this subject because I think renewable energy is a very important one.
Yeah.
And I like to think of it as an extendable of the oil age. It lets us take the oil and take it further by making that oil investment in something other than just burning it. I think when we burn it, like in an internal combustion engine or in a furnace to heat our house.
That's just the visible
burning
of it.
That makes us feel good at the moment. It gives us lots of power, but it's wasting a resource that's much more precious than that. Sure. And we don't think it's precious because of the fact that there's so much of it.
Right. From Murray Seward. Thank you, Murray. He says this is a very informative show, and he's one who needs time to absorb all the knowledge, so maybe a follow-up conversation in a few weeks. There you go. We could do this one again.
And the world may be very different. It's been changing day to day.
Yes. I mean, if this is the start of a collapse, it will be quite memorable. I mean, I think it's possible because in my belief is that it from a physics point of view, it has to collapse. We're in a debt bubble financially, and we're in an ecological debt situation where we have taken faster from the natural world than it can recover itself. So we have created this attack on nature that underlies the economic economy. And the economic economy really started in a time when there seemed to be plenty of everything. It didn't seem like we would ever run out, but now we know that everything's limited.
Like trees and fish and everything else in the environment.
Hi, caller. Welcome to Let's Talk on KWMR. You're on the air. What's your first name, please?
Hi, Melinda.
Hi, Melinda.
Hi, Melinda.
Hi. I'm calling out of ignorance, but my understanding is that the dollar used to be backed up by gold, which was a pretty long time ago, I guess.
Yep.
And now it is oil, because it's not just paper. It's, what is the basis of the American dollar? Other than, I think it's, and you've been talking about the preciousness of oil, which is, similar to how gold was precious at one time. So could you speak more to that? And also the whole idea of having a follow-up show where you really get into the link between the dollar and oil. And as I understand it, we have some kind of hedge on the global market that oil must be paid for in dollars. Is that correct or incorrect?
Yes. Well, that's been what has been the routine, and there have been attempts by other countries to get rid of that and have something else become the standard. Maybe the euro, maybe the Iranian currency. But there's been, and Russia would like it to be the ruble because it tends to uplift that economy and the value of that currency because oil trade trading is so essential. As you pointed out, when gold trading was what was the big value thing, if you could have a barrel of oil right now or a brick of gold, which would you rather have? Well, most people would take the oil because you can do something with it. With the gold, you just got a brick of gold.
Right. Well, I think maybe the one reason it's still the dollar's still based on oil and not the ruble or the euro or anything else is that we have the biggest guns.
Yeah, actually, it's not so much that the dollar is based on oil. Oil trading is done with the dollar. The dollar is based on trust, the good faith and credit of the United States of America. And as long as you believe that we in our centralized government will continue to honor anything that we print, then it's fine.
Well, let's talk more about that next time.
There you go.
Sure. Well, if you promise to call in, Melinda.
Well, I'll have to do a little reading up.
Oh, that's perfect. Well, you've added a lot to this show. Thank you, Melinda.
Okay.
Thanks, Melinda.
Mm-hmm. Bye-bye.
Bye.
So the example of someone who was trying to change the currency that was used to trade in oil is Muammar Gaddafi. What happened to him? Oh.
Yeah, well, see, if the people in the know, the bankers, the elite, essentially, the Koch brothers, know that this peak oil is happening, and know that in the end, as you get more into debt, which we've been doing as a nation, and we owe other nations like China tremendous amounts of money, the only hope of ever paying that off or getting your head above water is if things grow, if things are on the increase. Well, they know that to have a growing economy takes energy. Everything we do takes energy. Complexity, more energy. So everything, our education, our whole system of education, our science, our technology, it all uses huge amounts of energy. And if oil, which is what our age has been built on, is dwindling supply and is no longer what we call cheap energy, and the illusions of that we will get some cheap energy finally dissolve because too many people still hang on to the idea that because of human ingenuity and our technological prowess that we're going to overcome the second laws of thermodynamics, meaning that we're going to generate energy from nothing. Energy comes from mass or other energy. And, there's no question. As we thought of our trees and the oceans and the number of fish, everything we thought of as unlimited. That's why our technology kept being okay to take more fish, to take more trees faster, to take more soil and put it into agriculture, to take more of everything. That has all been enabled by cheap energy.
And it's really interesting because sort of on the flip side of me saying, how much does our own particular personal habits and or our judgment of others have to do with a real shift? There is the part of our consciousness shift as a species, and just little things I see in agriculture of people who are trying to do permaculture and organic. They still have these oil inputs by some of the equipment they have to have, by distribution, but I see so many of them now, knowing that they want to have working animals on the farms. They're doing more with people labor. They're doing stuff like the Giacomini's and Albert Strauss having methane digesters to power things and solar. But at the end of the day, we still have little things like, I know this is a tiny thing, but the Morgan horses that all of the park rangers used to ride through the Point Reyes National Seashore, they're letting that go away. The last 5 Morgan horses are there, and they went to electric vehicles. Oh. And I'm just thinking, you're riding around in electrical vehicles over this beautiful habitat you want to remain as pristine and treat as sacred.
Oh, that's sad.
And then you have this tradition of out of the Point Reyes National Seashore, these amazing Morgan horses that were famous for and great.
Is it too late? Can we do something about that?
Well, actually on the West Marin feed, they posted something about if we could get a little bit of public outcry, and maybe if the public's willing, is it about money? What's it about? So that's another thing too, is that ranch is going to be closing down, and so there are people saying, "Hey, could we have a dialogue and see if it could be saved, or at least saved because they're very good for searches and things like that." But those are just the little things that is a level of. I do want to say their small actions also raise consciousness, and that's important too. That we we as people 25 years ago were not thinking, most people like we're thinking right here at this table.
Yeah, no, you're so right. I'm a big fan of raising consciousness. I don't want people to stop, though, when they think that now, yes, I agree, climate change is human-made, so feed me your diet of commercial green products and I'll consume them. I want people to raise their awareness to the point that these are faux. Every time I hear the word solution, I immediately think false.
The only solution is to power down massively.
Yes, yes, and live locally sourced everything, including your energy. But the people here, are we ready to cut off from the grid? Are we ready to have electricity less than 24/7? Because if we were generating our own windmills and solar and hooked up at a local microgrid, that would be cool, but maybe we would have electricity for 3 hours a day. But wouldn't that be great? Because you would save up those things that you felt were most important that you needed the electricity for, rather than just buying another thing over the internet, having it shipped to your house and plugging it in and not thinking about what you're doing.
Well, it would reconnect. If we disconnect, then we reconnect to what's really natural in there. And I'm going to, instead of a car dealership, I'm going to open a donkey delership.
Oh, cool.
Because I think we should all be riding really cute donkeys, like Vespa donkeys. I'll have different color saddles. But just thinking about really how things were only 100 years ago. It's not that long ago that we lost our way.
Yeah. But go back to the Pony Express for delivering mail instead of the internet. Forget Facebook. Forget your tweets.
Don't forget the tweets.
But let's keep the station on the air, folks. We got to do that. and they have a power generator, so we got to collect enough fossil fuel to keep the generators running here at KWMR.
You would prioritize what's important. Communication like radio.
Yeah, and maybe it wouldn't be on 24 hours a day, but it would start up at 8 in the morning and
or
go
we
to
could
bed.
use biodiesel of some sort. We could grow some other...
Methane. We can have methane radio.
We could do methane radio.
The Iowa politics of methane.
Explosive hot air.
We have enough cows. We would be good.
So we got an email from Michael Stocker, who is the head of ocean conservation research, and he sent us a link to a thing from an interview with the president of the American Petroleum Institute, which has also joined forces with the Natural Gas Association. So they're all in the same bucket now. And it was all about how the price of oil and exploration of oil, it's all about the regulations that the government imposes. And we have to do away with all these terrible regulations on the oil industry. But there's all these other things, that like the Arctic shut down, the lease sales are off the market, Keystone was pulled out, and they're losing their footing in the Atlantic. Petrobras is floundering. And he says, I get the sense that the oil men are circling the wagons and trying to remain nonchalant, but listening to him in this context, it seems he's grasping. The dinosaur will not leave the room gracefully, though. Which is
Speaking of leaving the room, I wish to thank my co-hosts here and welcome again Robin Carpenter to Let's Talk. Thank our listeners. We've got a lot of loyal listeners, we know, and we hope that's growing. Our tweeters, we've got new tweeters joining us. And those people were brave enough to call in. We really thank you all for your participation. And I hope you'll call in every Thursday at 11 because your voice really does matter.